It's time for your assignment, and you're going to be working on a project that's very similar to the one that I made in the lesson. You'll be making a style frame for an ad for a company called Corensol, and they are a shaving cream manufacturer. So let's take a look at the files that you're going to get in your resources. They're all right here on my desktop, and we'll just start with this one. Just like I had, you're going to get a hand-sketched style frame layout from our creative director, and he's the one who's kind of envisioning what this whole layout should look like, and we've got some rough placement sketches here on this page. So make sure you go through all of this and pay attention to all of the little directions in here, and remember that these boxes here with the squiggly lines, those are 3 lines of text. We can see that note right here. And these boxes with X's are just representing placeholders. Remember, those aren't actually supposed to be boxes with crossed out X's in them. It looks like we're going to have a text logo and a shaving cream can. So if we take a look at our other files here, we have a CorensolLogo.ai, which is an Illustrator file. And if I open that up, we can take a look at what that looks like. And then the shaving cream can right here, which is this Corensol can, and you'll notice that is a .png file, which, if you remember, supports transparency. So if I preview that, this is what the shaving cream render looks like, and the edges are already cut out, so you can just place that into your Photoshop document. No need to cut anything out with the pen tool or anything else. And then inside of Illustrator, here's the Corensol logo. This is an Illustrator file. There is transparency behind it. It's a little bit hard to see because it is a white logo, but you can bring that type of file into Photoshop, an Illustrator file, just like any other image. So I'm just going to create a new document really quick to show you. We'll do the Web Large format, and then if you come up to File, Place Embedded, you can grab that Illustrator file, click on Place, and then this is going to ask you if you want to open it as a smart object. Just click OK, and here we go. It's right inside my Photoshop document. So I can scale this up or down however I want. Since it is vector, it's going to be able to scale infinitely. And if I turn off my artboard's transparency, we can see that entire logo as a whole there. Actually, if I make it black, it'll be even easier to see. So there you go. That's the logo. And then take a look at this section of your style frame guide right here. Looks like we need a bald man's head, and there's a note to play with the placement. So you're going to have a little bit of freedom of how you want to place that in that area of the frame. We do have some stock photos of a very handsome stock photography model, and there are lots of options to pick from. So you're going to have the choice of which photo you want to use. Use whichever one you think works best for the ad. But one thing I do want to point out is that you pay attention to how much of the model should be showing up inside of the layout. You see that our creative director kind of just roughly sketched in a person's head, but you don't really see any of the head, the neck or shoulders or anything like that. So there's more to these photos than you're necessarily going to use. So I'd strongly recommend that you kind of set up the placement of the photo you want to use first and then mask it out so that you don't do any extra work. You don't need to do all these little details around his shoulders on the shirt here if you're not going to show any of the shirt. So just don't do more work than you need to. That's all I'll say about that. Alright, finally what you're going to have is this PDF that is a brief and brand guide for the actual company of Corensol. So this is just going to give you a little bit of an overview of what the company is, what some of their values are, and then this little section right here is the brand identity. Now these are just 4 color swatches that are this company's primary colors. So generally these are the colors they're using in their own branding and advertising. It doesn't mean that you have to only use these 4 colors, but be aware. I think there were some notes in your style frame layout about the colors. So like right here, dark purple background, that is referring to this dark purple right here. So if it makes sense, use these colors, but don't be afraid to add in some of your own colors if you feel like you need it. This line right here is very important, so I want to point it out. It's saying that all display copy should be set in Korolev compressed heavy. Now, display copy is just a design term for text, any of the text that you see in the frame. So all of your text should be set in Korolev compressed heavy, which is available on Typekit. So you're going to need to go get that font before you type anything out. You've got your deliverables and requirements, and under that we see that our tagline, Corensol's tagline is be bold, be beautiful, be bald. So that's where you're going to need to see that text on 3 separate lines and using that font of Korolev. So that's where that's going to go. And then we have some additional information. Make sure that you're working at 1920 by 1080. Follow the guide from your creative director for the design layout, and then you get to choose which photo you think works best from those stock photos of our stock photography model. A couple more things. You can actually bring in this PDF into Photoshop just like we did with the Illustrator file. So if I jump back into Photoshop, I can come up to File, Place Embedded, and then find that PDF. Again, click OK, and then scale this up a little bit maybe. Press the check mark to commit those transform controls, and now I have those colors directly in my document. So I can use something like the eyedropper here and just click on any one of these colors to load it into my foreground color. So that way I can know that I'm using exactly that brand's colors. And lastly, we have one more note that I want to point out in this style frame guide. Right here, these lines, it says to do hand sketched glow. So you can kind of interpret that however you want, but I think that the creative director is going to want to see something that looks a little bit more hand done here. Now, this is a case where you'd probably want to use a Photoshop brush. And if you don't have a graphics tablet, that's fine. You can still do this with the mouse. Just take some time to play around with the different brushes that you have options to use, and see what works well with the mouse. And remember, you can get a lot more versatile and dynamic brushes if you go up to the brushes panel. So select your brush tool, come up to this little drop down arrow, settings, and then say get more brushes. And that'll take you to the Kyle T. Webster brush libraries, and you can download any of those for free and install them by after you download them, come to this same menu and go down to import brushes and navigate to those downloads. Now I would definitely recommend that you start with the Mega Pack just because it covers so many different types of tools. There's so much stuff in here. But then just start looking through and seeing what you can start to draw with your mouse. So let's just pick one at random here. I don't know, something really gritty. This one looks fun. And I'll make a new layer and start drawing on that. So there we go. We've got some textured edges, but remember that you can turn down the flow and then it's going to look a little bit different. Now this particular example isn't looking that great. It's looking just a little bit more transparent. It's kind of cloudy. So maybe that's not what you want to use. But if we scroll through here, maybe instead of the ink box, I'll go into the drawing box and we'll find something else like this one right here. So that one's got some pretty dark texture. If I turn the flow down, then it's going to have a lot less, and I can kind of add in some layering here if I go over and over again. So just play around with all of those different brushes and see what you can come up with and see if any of them lend themselves to this particular design. I'm going to clear this all out real quick and just draw a couple more lines, and then let's say that I drew this, but now I'm not happy with that color. What if I wanted to do the green color instead of this purple? Well, a really quick way to be able to adjust this kind of thing is to just fill the layer with the color that you choose. So I'm going to switch to my eyedropper, select that green, and then if I use the keyboard shortcut for fill with foreground, which is Option Delete, that's going to fill it with green, but it filled the entire layer with green. So how do I keep that from going everywhere and just keep it right onto what I had already painted? Well, I'm going to undo, Command Z, and this little icon right here is Lock Transparent Pixels. And what this is going to do, if I click on it with that layer selected, is not allow me to put any kind of adjustments on anything except what's already there. So if I were to grab my brush tool and just paint over this, you can see that I'm not able to paint outside of those lines. Now, I don't need to brush it in by hand. I can do the same fill command of Option Delete, and that's going to fill all of the pixels that were already there with this color. So that's one way that you can adjust your colors. And if you want to add more to your drawing layer after the fact, just make sure to uncheck that Lock Transparent Pixels, and then I can go back to my brush tool and continue to draw on top of this. Alright, that's it. So to recap your assignment, you're going to be making one style frame for Corensol. Follow all of your creative director's notes on that style frame guide and use that guide as a reference for the layout that you create in Photoshop. Also make sure that you're following Corensol's guides for their brand. You're using their colors, you're using their fonts, and when it comes to the stock photography model, you get to have creative freedom on which photo you want to use for that. Put all of that together in a 1920 by 1080 document, and once you're finished, Export that as a JPEG and upload it to the Homework Locker, and make sure that you also include your project files. That's it for this assignment. Good luck!